Hi everyone, and welcome to part 3 in the final video of my Crossing Newfoundland by ATV 2023 video series. If you watched part 1 and 2, you saw us drive to North Sydney, Nova Scotia, where we took the overnight ferry to Port Aux Basques, Newfoundland, and then you saw us ride to Stephenville, Corner Brook, Lomond, Howley, and Deer Lake. In this video, we ride from Deer Lake to Cloudy Pond, Robinson's, and then back to Port Aux Basques, where we take the Marine Atlantic ferry overnight back to Nova Scotia. It's a spectacular scenic conclusion to our off-road adventure. After watching this series, I think you'll understand why I call it the ATV trip of a lifetime. In fact, I've had many people tell me it should be just called the trip of a lifetime. Day 7, Deer Lake to Cloudy Pond. 8 of our group stayed here and the rest of us stayed somewhere else, but we all gathered here for breakfast. And Tony prepared a hearty breakfast for us all as per usual.
What's today, Wednesday?
I have no idea.
You know you're having a good time on your trip when you don't know what day it is and you don't even care.
Once a month?
Tony the chef. After breakfast, Daryl did a last-minute walk around the house to make sure we didn't leave anything behind. Because my fuel pump died, my machine would be staying behind in Corner Brook at the dealership. That meant Daryl would be riding with Dwayne in the Defender, and I'd be riding with Josh in his Pioneer. And poor Josh's Pioneer was packed from the floor to the roof. We left the Airbnb, drove to the Foodland grocery store, and packed our coolers with supplies to spend the night at the remote Cloudy Pond. Then we stopped at Tim Hortons briefly for those that wanted a coffee before hitting the trail. Before I go any further, I have to take a minute to give a shout out to my brother-in-law, Daryl. He's joined us on these trips 4 times now since 2020. Not only is he one heck of a guy, he's an excellent photographer and videographer. He shoots a lot of what you've seen in the Newfoundland videos since 2020. He uses multiple style cameras, including action cameras, a DSLR, and 360 cameras. He wasn't into the off-roading scene before coming with us, and he's been subjected to some serious heat, dust, rain, and maybe a mishap or two along the way, and he's still down for more. Thanks for being such a great asset to Crossing Newfoundland by ATV, Daryl. The drive to Cloudy Pond from Deer Lake is only about 35 kilometers or 21 miles, so it really doesn't take long to get there. It's pretty straightforward, and there are a few bridges that look a bit sketchy. They're pretty solid though, but sometimes people avoid them and drive through the river if it's not running fast. But you should really try to not do that if you can avoid it.
Oh yeah, bridge not safer. Yeah, you probably shouldn't go on that thing.
Bruce crossed the bridge no problem. Josh didn't like the look of it, so he opted for the water since it was pretty low. They thought it was a good idea to put the 6x6 through the water too, just given its extra weight. A few minutes later, we came across another bridge that looked a bit sketchy as we approached it. The guys with the heavier machines were a bit reluctant to cross it. As it would turn out, the bridge was completely solid and there was nothing to worry about, but we didn't know that at first. After a few minutes of inspection, the boys were satisfied and decided to give it a try. Perfect. Barely any flex at all. We've been over this bridge before on other occasions, and we drove around it one time, or maybe twice, because of the amount of flex that it had. Someone obviously put some time and effort into strengthening it. I just want to say thank you to whoever it was that worked on it. We arrived there pretty early, around lunchtime, so that gave us lots of time to enjoy the rest of the day. Cloudy Pond is a beautiful spot. I first came across it around 2003 on an ATV trip, and back then the lodge was mostly used as a snowmobile tourism destination. I stopped by and visited several years later and discovered that the new owners rented it as an Airbnb, so we started staying there. We would stay a few nights every year on our trips. The new owner doesn't rent it out anymore, but the lake is still a beautiful place to stop by and visit if you're in the area. The new owner pretty much lives there all summer and periodically throughout the year, so if you visit the lake, please keep the noise down. And then of course we always play our favorite card game, Pass the Ace. If you haven't played this before, look the rules up online. It's great for a large group of people. Always the bride's being
Do we have one more in us or what?
The nice thing about Newfoundland is that there are many nice peaceful spots here like this around, and I always look forward to discovering more of them. If you know of a spot you think we should check out, please post a comment in the comment section below, or if you want, send me a private message on my Crossing Newfoundland by ATV Facebook page. Here's a quick recap of what we did that day. We left Deer Lake around 10:15 in the morning and arrived in Cloudy Pond at around 1:30 for a total of about 3 hours and 15 minutes. That included all the time we spent in Deer Lake getting groceries and things like that first. We only drove about 40 kilometers or about 24 miles. Our average moving speed was roughly 30 kilometers an hour or 18 miles an hour. Our maximum elevation was 834 feet and we climbed 1,674 feet and descended 1,622 feet. Day 8, Cloudy Pond to Robinson's. As you can see, it was a beautiful morning. We took our time enjoying the view of the lake, and Tony made another awesome breakfast using some of the leftovers from the previous night's dinner.
You like to cook, Tony?
I do.
We did a thorough cleanup, packed our gear, and made our way back to the trail, a little later than we should have, but we knew we could make up time. We also knew it was going to be a long day of riding, as it's over 170 kilometers from Cloudy Pond to Robinson's.
Oh, that's thick.
Not only is that little hole surprisingly deep, there's a big rock in there that you have to be careful of, because if you hit it in the wrong spot, you could end up with a bent tie rod. Not long after leaving Cloudy Pond, you'll come to a river crossing. You'll be tempted to drive straight across, but don't do that. Those of you that have seen videos from years past know it can be very deep there, and a few of our guys almost swamped one year. That's not something you want to deal with on a trip like this, especially when you're far from home. Just stay close to the outer edge where the rock berm is, and you'll be fine. Easy. Wind might have some water in their floorboards. I'll show you what it looks like on the map in case you do this route. There's Cloudy Pond, there's the river crossing. If you zoom in here, you can see that you'll want to go straight across. Don't do that. Even on a shallow year, it's really deep.
Oh, Patrick.
She's gonna
Patrick.
Well, you've been coming up here forever. Yeah.
We stopped in Corner Brook for a break, and we ran into a couple from the United States that were doing the trip based on my website. The gentleman's wife was a little annoyed because they showed up without any GPS tracks at all. I downloaded Locust Maps on his phone and installed my tracks for them so that they could follow them for the rest of the trip. Just after we passed Corner Brook, we were flagged down by a fan of my YouTube channel. He was following our trip based on my Facebook updates, and he wanted to meet us in person.
Oh, we got the glass window and the wiper and the roof. That's nice.
That's a nice one.
It's a nice setup. Keep you out of the rain. The roll up windows.
That's pretty sweet.
They had one like that over there.
They did? Were you tempted?
Yeah, they had a couple actually.
Yes, I was definitely tempted to trade my Commander in on a new one when I found out I had to leave my machine in Corner Brook and finish out the rest of the trip on Josh's machine, but more on that later. Usually we stop in at Camp 7 for a break. By the time we left this day, it stopped raining, which was a bonus. And just outside of Stephenville Crossing, the darn flat ferry showed up. That's why I tell people to make sure they bring tire plugs and an air compressor. Once you pass Stephenville Crossing, you come across beautiful Black Banks Beach, which is a pretty spot, and I recommend riding along the sand. But keep in mind it's the ocean, it's not a lake, so you're going to have to drive through a bit of salt water here and there. So if you don't want to do that, be sure to stay on the main trail. This section of trail always seems to be full of water for some reason, and I'm glad it's there, especially if we happen to drive through any salt water back at the beach. Not long before we arrived at Pirates Haven, which was our destination for the next 2 nights, we came across a beaver dam that was overflowing, and it took out part of the trail. Someone had been there the day before and put down some logs.
They're trying to trap it.
We spent a few minutes checking over the logs, which seemed to be surprisingly solid, so we decided to give it a try. Josh was the first one to go just because of the order we arrived. It's always tough being the first one going across something like that. Josh did a great job.
Yep.
Then it was Bruce's turn, and it might not look that difficult on the camera, but it's quite a bit different when you're actually sitting in the driver's seat and you have to cross this. Especially with that left side of the dam right there, we were afraid that that was going to start giving away on us as we were going over. That Can-Am Commander of Bruce's, by the way, has over 27,000 kilometers on it, which is over 16,000 miles. Before Dwayne could go next on the 6x6, he noticed he had a flat tire that he had to take care of.
First flat tire ever in Newfoundland.
For you?
Yes.
How'd you pull that off all those years not getting the flat?
I had ripsaws. See?
Oh, ripsaws.
If I had ripsaws on there, wouldn't have had a flat.
Yep. The Beaver House.
Oh, that's a, you can try to box on top of that.
With the entrance of the seal, it'll be down here. Look at the water he backed up, little bugger.
Wynn and Dale were driving behind Dwayne, and they said they noticed that his middle tire was flat for quite a while, but Dwayne said he didn't even feel anything at all. I guess that's the benefit of a 6x6. The other machines made it across here relatively fine, and we were very interested to see how this big beast of a machine was going to do.
You want to go that way a little bit? There you go. Straighter. There you go.
Not only was it no problem at all, it was clearly the smoothest of all the machines yet. If you're contemplating doing this trip, don't let washouts like this intimidate you from going. They're usually fixed quickly by local users, and oftentimes there's an easy way around them. I keep updates on my Crossing Newfoundland by ATV Facebook page during the riding season. I warn people of any washouts, tell them where they are, how to get around them, and I'll even post GPS tracks if required. Shortly after the washout, we arrived at our favorite place to stay in Newfoundland, Pirates Haven. The cabins on the hilltop are oh so nice. They're cozy, well appointed, and not far from the main building in the campground called the Longhouse. If you have the time, I highly recommend staying here for a few nights, and I also suggest taking advantage of one of their ATV tour packages. They'll take you to incredibly scenic spots you wouldn't likely find on your own, and they'll even provide trail meals and snacks. Pirates Haven even has a lot of events during the summer, so keep an eye on their Facebook page. You might be able to time your trip around one of their events. Here's a quick recap of our journey that day. We left Codroy Pond at 10 a.m. and we arrived at Pirates Haven at 8 p.m. for a total of 10 hours. We drove 172 kilometers, or about 107 miles. Our average moving speed was 40 kilometers an hour, or about 24 miles an hour. Our maximum elevation was 1,137 feet. We climbed 4,231 feet and descended 4,333 feet. Day 9. Rest day at Pirates Haven. We originally planned on riding around the area that day and doing some exploring, but since it was such a nice peaceful day, we just opted to stick around Pirates Haven. Some of us even went down to the river to go swimming as it was really hot, and some of us just lazed around the campground and enjoyed a relaxing day. On a trip like this, I highly suggest giving yourself a planned down day somewhere in your trip.
What else we got going on over here?
Just some veggies.
Veggies.
And after there's going to be some nice moose put in there.
Some moose. Look at those mushrooms. I can't wait for supper.
We hope.
Good, good, good. And look how close to the awesome view we have. What do you guys think?
Tony, your moose stew was phenomenal. Thank you for all your hard work that you do every year on all these trips for all the meals that you make. Everybody really appreciates it. After supper, we drove across the street to Robinson's Head to watch the sunset. They are some of the nicest sunsets you'll ever see. The bugs would carry you away, they were so bad.
Oh, these are bad.
The ride over to see the view was worth it, hungry nippers or not. Just wear long sleeves and make sure you have some bug spray if the bugs are bad.
Now they're talking to each other.
After everyone got their fill of photos, we hopped in the buggies and went back to the cabins. We decided to enjoy every minute outside right now because we heard there was a lot of rain coming the next day. Day 10, Robinsons to Port Aux Basques, our final day on the island. We had a nice evening at the cabins, and we were happy to see it wasn't raining by the time we got up. Even though the cabins are well appointed, we always like to have breakfast at the Longhouse because it's always so good. Ruth and Donna make a hell of a breakfast, and we like spending as much time with the owners, Paul and Ruth, as we can.
Well, we look forward to having you with us.
I can't tell you how many people have sent me messages telling me how happy they were that they stayed at Pirates Haven. It's a wonderful spot, and Paul and Ruth treat everyone like family. Do yourself a favor and spend a few nights here during your trip. You won't regret it. Normally, the first thing we do when leaving Robinsons is to drive the loop around Robinson's Head. It's about 5 kilometers and it's pretty scenic with nice views of the bluff and the beach below. But since we stopped at the bluff for the sunset the night before, we didn't do it this year. We skipped over that and just got right on the trail. If you haven't driven the loop, I highly recommend doing it before you leave Robinsons. It still wasn't raining by the time we left, so we were pretty happy about that. We weren't on the trail very long at all before we ran into a group from New Brunswick that we stopped to talk to briefly.
Have a great ride, guys. Okay, see you later. Have a great ride.
They were following my site information to do the trip. Tons of people have done this trip using my website and videos as their virtual guide. So can you. Don't overthink it. Just plan it and go. You'll be glad you did. I have several variations of the Crossing Newfoundland by ATV trip on my EastCoastATV YouTube channel from previous years. The videos contain tons of tips and information to help you plan a trip for you and your friends and family. As you can see, there are a few sections where it's grown in quite a bit, but it doesn't matter. It's not going to hurt your machine any. As you can see, the mountain tops were clouded over, but we decided that our first major stop that day would be the Southbranch Mountain view anyways. We love it up there. It's very steep, so if you attempt it, use 4 low. You'll only be able to drive about 5 or 6 miles per hour in a few spots. It's not nearly as rough and rocky as the tabletop trail is though. It's only about 100 kilometers or 60 miles from Robinsons to Port Aux Basques, and if you drive straight on the rail bed without doing any kind of awesome side trips like this, it's only going to take you about 4 or 5 hours to get there. So we do several side trips and we don't arrive back at the ferry until close to dark, or even after dark, because we try to enjoy every last minute of this trip. Some of that rain started to roll in, and Bruce and Tony stopped immediately and started putting on their rain gear. We figured there wasn't going to be much of a view from the top due to the weather. We did it anyway because it's a fun trek to the top. Here's a tip for people that haven't done the trip yet. Invest in a good rain suit and make sure you have good footwear. I wear waterproof hiking sneakers and I switch to rubber boots depending on the conditions. And this is the view from the top on a nice clear day. We made our way back down the mountain and the view improved of course as we get below the cloud level. We didn't have to travel very far to get to the trail to our next side trip, Little Codroy Pond. The trail into the pond is about 4.5 to 5 kilometers or 2.5 to 3 miles. It's a lot of fun. It's a bit tight in spots, but a 64-inch wide machine will make it no problem, maybe even wider. Like I said before, this is a fun trail, and then when you get to the end, it opens wide up to this beautiful lake and all these mountains in the background. How do you beat something like this? Tony grabbed some wood to make a fire, and Dwayne set up his gas barbecue for lunch that Tony kindly took care of for everyone. We were quite lucky that we didn't have much in the way of rain yet, given the forecast was calling for a lot of it. Just as we were trying to finish up lunch, the rain found us, and it was amazing to watch this huge rainstorm roll in, but it was about 200 feet away from us. It was like a big wall of rain. Well, at first, then it found us.
Oh, it's coming over to us now.
That's quite something.
Remember earlier when I said good rain gear is important? Well, I wasn't kidding. And then the rain just seemed to kind of take off and blow away almost as fast as it came in. After leaving Codroy Pond, we continued on about 20 kilometers or 12 miles to a beautiful beach in the St. Andrews area. I don't actually know the name of the beach, so if somebody watching knows, please leave a message below in the comment section to tell me what it is. If the tide's low enough, you can drive along that beach to get all the way back to the trail without having to backtrack. But we had a little problem with that, as you'll see here shortly. These water holes you see here are filled with salt water and fresh water, so don't drive to the beach if you don't want to drive through that. It's just one beautiful spot after another in Newfoundland. This beach is only about 25 kilometers away from Port Aux Basques, so our trip is almost done, but there's still some beautiful places to see yet. You can ride all the way down the beach here to get back on the trailhead without having to backtrack the way we came in. But you have to make sure the tide is not in, and it wasn't. It was coming in though at this point when we were coming through here. And Tony was driving Bruce's machine as they were heading back to the main trail, and he kind of took a bit of a wrong turn. He went a little too far to the right, and he found some very loose, soft gravel and sand and sunk almost instantly.
Oh man, stay there. We can winch you out. I can come and hook onto the back here and pull you out.
What you don't see on the video is that his trailer hitch was in the sand below the water line, and no one videotaped me laying down in the water digging it out so I could get the hook on the back of it. The tall rubber boots that I'm wearing are completely waterproof, but I also discovered they will actually hold quite a bit of water. Bruce was all smiles now that we got his baby out of danger. That tide was coming in so fast, another 10 minutes it probably would have been swamped. I love driving the trailway in the southwest region when you're driving along the coast here. The views are just incredible. Our next stop is Sugarloaf. It's about 250 meters to the top. It's a beautiful view of the valley below. That's Tabletop on the other side. We were there on the very first day. And this has a beautiful, beautiful view, especially if you get here around sunset, which is usually the way we time it. It's not on purpose, that just seems to be when we always arrive here. On the next trip, I'm going to leave Pirates Haven a bit earlier so that I can get to the Tabletop early enough to watch this sunset. I bet the view from there is just incredible. If you remember from our first day, we are approaching the spot where there was a big washout. Actually, at the time, it wasn't a washout, it was just a sinkhole, but it was still unsafe to pass. But since then, the entire area washed right out, and we're just coming up to that section here in a minute.
I can do it. It's not a big deal. You're all right. Yeah.
And the funny thing is, with this whole section washed out, we didn't have to backtrack or drive on the highway like 3 or 4 miles like we did the last time to get around it. Just imagine if someone was driving over that at the time it washed away. We still had a bit of a drive ahead of us to get to the ferry, and less than an hour to get there and check in. We had one more small issue that we forgot about. There was another washout that was easy to get through on day one when we were going the other direction. But since the tide was coming in, the water was getting deep. Tony volunteered to walk out and find a shallow path for us to follow. If you're doing this trip in 2024, don't worry. All the trail issues you saw in this video are fixed. This truly is the ATV trip of a lifetime. If you'd like to do this trip, but you've been putting it off, just plan it. Life's too short. Everything you need to know is on my website. Gather a couple of your friends and make it happen. You won't regret it. I can't tell you how many people told me they are so happy that they did this trip, that it was everything and more than they thought it would be, and that they made lifelong lasting memories. The ferry terminal is only a few minutes away, and when everyone gets there to check in, you have to be sprayed down for agricultural purposes.
We went 1,030 kilometers.
Is that what it was?
Wynn just said our total distance was 1,030 kilometers. And for the day, we traveled over 10.5 hours and over 130 kilometers, or over 80 miles. Thanks for joining us for another fantastic Crossing Newfoundland by ATV trip. I sincerely hope these videos encourage you to plan a trip like this for you and your friends or family. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel. It's a small way that you can help me out with YouTube. Here's a quick recap of the entire trip. You know, I'm almost done, but not quite done. I want to say thank you to Dwayne and Josh for taking Daryl and I with them so we could finish out the rest of the trip after my machine broke down in Deer Lake. And I want to give a shout out and a very special thank you to Paul Gale from Pirates Haven, who arranged to pick up my machine when it was fixed in Corner Brook, and he hauled it all the way to the ferry terminal and put it on the ferry so I could pick it up in Nova Scotia. He's the finest kind. Thanks again, Paul. 1 month later. I drove to North Sydney to pick up my baby. I hitched a ride with the transport they use for walk-ons, and I gotta tell you, I was pretty happy to see the old girl, especially with Moosey on top, keeping watch. It was a pretty unique experience being the only person driving off the ferry. I loaded her up on the trailer, and me and Mrs. Crossing Newfoundland by ATV spent the weekend in Bedeque before taking her home. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay safe out there, and please consider subscribing to the channel.